Hi, my name is Jessica, though most people just call me Jess. And a year ago, I stood in a courtroom across from the man I thought I knew better than anyone in this world, my own husband, Mark. He wasn't there to fight for our marriage. He wasn't there to admit his mistakes or ask for forgiveness. He was there to take away the one thing that mattered most to me, our 6-year-old son, Daniel. Mark didn't just want custody. He wanted to destroy me. And at first it looked like he would win, because when you're a man in a sharp suit with money, charm, and parents cheering for you, the world is quick to believe your story. But the truth has a way of cutting through the lies. And when it finally came out, it didn't just save me, it exposed him for who he really was. If you saw us from the outside, you'd think we were the perfect little family. Mark in his tailored suits, shaking hands at networking events. Me, smiling at his side, balancing a glass of wine while making polite conversation. Our son Daniel, dressed in miniature button-downs, the kind of kid people like to call adorable. Neighbors would tell me how lucky I was. Friends would whisper how Mark must treat me like a queen. Even my own parents would look at him with pride and say, "He's such a good provider, Jess. You really found someone special." But behind closed doors, the picture was very different. Mark cared more about his reflection in the mirror than the child tugging at his sleeve. He knew how to charm a client, but not how to soothe a fever. He could spend hours perfecting a presentation, but couldn't spare 5 minutes to read Daniel a bedtime story. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself, he works hard. He's stressed. He'll come around. But the truth was staring me in the face. Mark wasn't building a family. He was building an image. When I raised the issue, he brushed it off. "Jess," he'd say with that perfect smile, "I'm doing all of this for us." For Daniel. You worry too much. But the credit card bills told a different story. Designer suits, luxury bars, online poker sites. He wasn't building a future for us. He was feeding his ego. The breaking point came one night when Daniel spiked a fever so high I rushed him to the emergency room at 2 a.m. I called Mark over and over. He didn't pick up. Hours later, he finally texted back, "Busy. Handle it." I remember sitting in that cold hospital room, holding Daniel's small hand while he slept, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy's not going anywhere." That night, something shifted in me. I stopped pretending we were a happy family. I stopped hoping Mark would change. And I started quietly preparing, saving receipts, filing away records, keeping every scrap of proof that Daniel's well-being had always rested on my shoulders, not his. Because deep down, I knew if Mark ever decided to walk away, he wouldn't just walk. He'd try to take everything with him. I didn't have to wait long. A month later, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. "Family court summons," it read at the top. My stomach dropped. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Plaintiff, Mark Taylor. Defendant, Jessica Taylor. The accusation? That I was unfit to raise our child. That I was reckless, irresponsible, financially unstable. In black and white, he painted me as a danger to my own son. And to twist the knife deeper, my in-laws had signed affidavits supporting him. People I once called family, people who'd eaten at my table, played with my child, celebrated birthdays in our backyard, now swore I wasn't capable of being a mother. I felt the air leave my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And yet, something inside me hardened. Mark thought he could bury me under his lies. He thought I would crumble under the weight of his confidence, his money, his parents' support. But he had underestimated me. Because while he was busy crafting his image, I had been quietly collecting the truth. And soon, the truth would be the only weapon I needed. The courthouse was colder than I imagined. Not the temperature, though the air conditioning did prickle against my skin, but the way the walls seemed to swallow warmth, leaving nothing but echoes of footsteps and the shuffle of papers. When the bailiff called our case, my heart slammed so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Taylor versus Taylor, petition for full custody. I rose slowly, clutching the binder I'd spent weeks preparing. My fingers dug into its cover like it was a lifeline. Across the room, Mark was already standing, shoulders squared, jaw tight, his navy blue suit tailored to perfection. He looked like a man ready to win. And why wouldn't he? He had my parents sitting proudly behind him. He had his lawyer, a man with slicked back hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He had confidence oozing from every pore. I had myself. The judge, a tall man with silver-framed glasses, adjusted the papers before him and said, "Mr. Taylor, as the petitioner, you may present your case." Mark stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the stand with a performance so smooth it made my stomach churn. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady, charming just as I knew it would be. "I never wanted this. I believe children should be raised with both parents. But I cannot sit by while my son suffers. My wife, Jessica, has repeatedly shown that she is not capable of providing a stable environment for Daniel." He paused, just long enough to glance at me with something that looked like pity, but was really triumph. "She has been careless with money, reckless with responsibility. There were nights when Daniel was left alone, unsupervised. I've had to step in more times than I can count to keep things from falling apart." I felt my nails bite into my palm. Left Daniel alone? That had never happened. Not once. But Mark wasn't finished. He gestured to the stack of papers his lawyer handed up. "Here are statements from my parents, people who have witnessed firsthand the neglect Jessica has shown. They can attest to her instability, her inability to prioritize Daniel's needs above her own." Behind him, my mother, my own mother, nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line of judgment. My father folded his arms, his face as stern as if he were listening to a business deal. The judge flipped through the documents, his expression unreadable. "We'll review these." Mark leaned in slightly, his voice softening in a way that I knew was rehearsed. "Your Honor, I don't want to take Daniel away from his mother completely. I just want him safe. I propose that I have full custody, with Jessica allowed limited visitation under supervision." It was a dagger dressed as mercy. When he returned to his seat, he sat tall, as if the verdict had already been written in his favor. My lawyer whispered, "Stay calm, don't react yet." But calm was the last thing I felt. My pulse pounded in my ears. Every word he'd spoken was a lie, and yet he said it with such conviction I could see the court leaning his way. That was Mark's gift. He could dress lies in truth so neatly that people wanted to believe him. Then came the testimonies. First, my mother took the stand. "I love my daughter," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "But she has always been distracted. She means well, but she doesn't always put Daniel first. I've seen times when the house was a mess, when she seemed overwhelmed. Mark has always been the stable one." Her words were polite daggers, carefully planted to pierce without drawing blood. Then my father. "Mark works hard. He provides. Jessica doesn't seem to understand responsibility the same way he does. Children need structure. I believe Daniel would be better off primarily with his father." I wanted to scream. Structure? Was it structure when Mark skipped Daniel's birthdays for business dinners? When he missed every parent-teacher meeting? When he was too busy to hold our son's hand in a hospital bed? But I stayed silent. For now. The final blow came when Mark himself returned to the stand. He clasped his hands, lowered his voice, and said, "Your Honor, this isn't about me. It's about Daniel. He deserves a childhood free from chaos. I'm simply asking you to give him that chance. To anyone who didn't know him, he looked like the picture of sincerity, a father begging for his son's well-being, a husband reluctantly exposing his wife's flaws. But I knew better. This wasn't about Daniel. This was about control. This was about punishing me for daring to walk away, for daring to challenge the image he had built. The judge turned his gaze to me. "Mrs. Taylor," he said evenly, "you may respond." I stood, the binder heavy in my hands, and though my knees trembled, my voice did not, because while Mark had words and charm, I had something far more powerful: proof. And soon everyone in that room would see the truth for themselves. When the judge said, "Mrs. Taylor, you may respond," the room shifted. All eyes turned to me, the accused, the mother supposedly unfit to care for her own child. I stood slowly, pressing my palms against the binder I had brought with me. Weeks of sleepless nights had gone into its pages. Proof, receipts, records, witness statements, every piece carefully collected like stones for a wall I knew I would one day need to stand behind. Mark leaned back in his chair, smirking, as though he was humoring me. To him, my evidence couldn't possibly outweigh his performance. My parents' testimonies had already stacked the odds against me, but he had underestimated me. "Your Honor," I began, forcing my voice to stay steady, "the picture Mr. Taylor painted of me is convincing, but it is not the truth. Allow me to show you the truth." I opened the binder, the soft snap of the rings echoing in the silent courtroom. The first tab was labeled School and Medical Records. I held up a set of forms with Daniel's name printed across the top. "These are Daniel's school attendance logs. Here are the signatures of the parent who dropped him off and picked him up every day this past year." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Whose signature is that?" "Mine," I answered. "Every single one. Mr. Taylor's name does not appear once." A flicker of unease passed over Mark's face, but he quickly smoothed it into neutrality. I continued, sliding another set of papers forward. "These are hospital admission forms from the times Daniel was sick or injured. You'll see the signatures authorizing treatment are all mine. Mr. Taylor's name is absent. In fact, on the night of Daniel's highest fever, 2 a.m. when I rushed him to the ER, Mr. Taylor did not even answer his phone." The judge glanced at Mark. "Mr. Taylor, do you dispute this?" Mark cleared his throat. I was traveling for work that night. She's exaggerating." But the record didn't lie. The hospital timestamp matched my claim exactly. I flipped to the next tab. Financial records. "These are bank statements, Your Honor. You'll see every payment for Daniel's school fees, medical bills, clothing, food, all made from my personal account. Meanwhile, these are Mr. Taylor's expenditures during the same period." I held up highlighted printouts. High-end clothing stores, luxury bars, online gambling transactions. The judge's brows furrowed. "Your Honor, he accuses me of financial recklessness, but the evidence shows who has been supporting our son and who has been indulging in personal luxuries." Behind me, I could hear murmurs ripple through the courtroom benches. Even my father shifted uncomfortably. Mark's lawyer quickly stood. "Objection, Your Honor. These statements are out of context. They don't prove neglect. Only spending habits." The judge raised a hand. "Objection noted. Continue, Mrs. Taylor." I turned the page to the next tab, Witness Statements. "I'd like to submit letters from Daniel's daycare teacher, his pediatrician, and our neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez. All of them confirm that I am the one who consistently cares for Daniel, while Mr. Taylor is rarely, if ever, present." The judge skimmed the letters, his expression unreadable, but I saw something. A crack. A small shift. The certainty that had hung around Mark like a shield was no longer impenetrable. Mark tapped his pen against the table, his jaw tight. His lawyer whispered something to him, but his eyes stayed locked on me, sharp and burning. I knew that look. It was the look he gave me when he was losing control. I paused, my hand resting on the binder. My chest rose and fell as I steadied myself. This wasn't just about winning custody. This was about finally speaking truths I had buried for years. Your Honor, I said quietly but firmly, Mark has accused me of neglect, of being unstable, of failing our son. But the truth is, while he has been busy maintaining his image, I have been the one raising Daniel. I have been the one showing up. I have been the one holding our child's hand when he was scared, sick, or hurt. My voice caught, but I pressed on. And I am not asking you to take Daniel away from his father. I am asking you to see who has truly been here for him and who has not. For a moment, silence filled the room. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade. The judge nodded slowly, jotting something down on his notepad. Mrs. Taylor, this is helpful documentation. Do you have additional evidence to submit? I closed the binder. Not yet. The strongest piece was still waiting. The bombshell that would strip away every last layer of Mark's carefully crafted mask. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady now. But I believe what I've shown so far begins to reveal the truth, that the story my husband has told is not reality, and reality always leaves a trail. I sat back down, my hands trembling slightly, but not from fear. For the first time since the summons arrived, I felt a shift inside me, a spark of hope. Because I had seen it in the judge's eyes. The cracks were forming, and soon Mark's entire case would begin to crumble. The courthouse felt heavier as the morning dragged on. Mark sat stiffly in his chair, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear. My parents stared straight ahead, as if refusing to acknowledge the cracks that had already begun to spread through their son's story. I knew I had to deliver the final blow, and I had it. Your Honor, I said, standing once more, my binder clutched tightly against my chest. With the court's permission, I'd like to submit one last piece of evidence. The judge nodded. Proceed. From my bag, I pulled out a small digital recorder. My hands trembled slightly as I placed it on the evidence table, the weight of months of secrecy pressing down on me. This, I explained, is a recording from 3 weeks ago. It was captured in our living room during a conversation between Mark and myself. In it, he makes his intentions very clear. Mark's head snapped toward me. Objection, his lawyer barked. Unverified, potentially manipulated, and irrelevant. The judge raised an eyebrow. We'll decide relevance after review. Play it. My lawyer pressed play. And then, his voice filled the room. Mark's voice, clear, cold, unmistakable. I don't care about the kid. I just want Jess to lose everything. That'll teach her. The words hung in the air like poison. For a moment, silence blanketed the room. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers hovering above the keys. The judge leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. Mr. Taylor, do you dispute that this is your voice? Mark shifted in his seat, his face pale. His Adam's apple bobbed. Your Honor, it was taken out of context. I was angry. I didn't mean... The judge cut him off. It's a yes or no question. Is this your voice? A long pause. Finally, he muttered, yes. Gasps rippled across the courtroom benches. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's eyes darted to the floor. The judge removed his glasses and folded his hands on the bench. So noted. I stood a little taller, my voice steady. Your Honor, the man who claims he is fighting for his child admitted in his own words that this is not about Daniel's welfare. It is about punishing me, about control. That is not fatherhood. That is vindictiveness. Mark's lawyer tried to recover. Your Honor, emotions run high in divorce proceedings. We can't weigh a single angry statement over years of responsibility. The judge raised a hand, silencing him. Enough. The recording speaks for itself. I turned, glancing at the gallery behind me. For the first time, I saw my parents' faces not as pillars of certainty, but as fragile, fractured. My mother looked as though the floor had been yanked out from beneath her. My father rubbed his forehead, avoiding my gaze entirely. And Mark, the smirk he had worn since the trial began, was gone. His jaw clenched, his fists balled tight, but his eyes were wild, like a man who realized the ground beneath him was collapsing. The judge spoke again, his voice low but firm. This court is not in the business of settling personal vendettas, Mr. Taylor. Custody cases are about the child's best interests, and based on the evidence presented, it is clear where those interests lie. The tension in the room snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Mark slammed his palm against the table. "This is ridiculous. She's twisting everything." "Sit down, Mr. Taylor," the judge commanded, his voice sharp as steel. The bailiff stepped forward, ready if Mark made another outburst. He sank back into his chair, red-faced, muttering under his breath. I remained standing, my hands trembling but my spine unbending. I hadn't just defended myself, I had exposed the truth. When the judge called for a recess, I stepped into the hallway. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder. "You did well, Jess. That recording—" She shook her head. It sealed it. I leaned against the cool marble wall, closing my eyes. For the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself breathe, really breathe. But relief was tangled with something heavier, grief. Because the man I once loved, the father of my child, had admitted openly that Daniel wasn't his concern. I had suspected it for years, but hearing it in his own voice, it cut deeper than any accusation. I opened my eyes to find my mother standing a few feet away, her face pale. "Jess," she whispered, almost pleading, "he didn't mean it. You know your brother, he's just upset." "Upset?" I said, my voice cracking. "Mom, he tried to take my son from me. He lied in court, and you stood there and swore I was unfit. You call that just upset?" Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. She turned away, walking back toward the courtroom without looking at me. I realized then that the cracks weren't just in Mark's case. They were in my family, and nothing would ever put them back together the same way again. When the recess ended and we returned to the courtroom, I walked in not as a woman on trial, but as a mother who had finally pulled the mask off her accuser. The truth was out, and nothing Mark could say now would bury it again. When we filed back into the courtroom after recess, the air was different. The tension had shifted. The smirk on Mark's face was gone. My parents no longer looked triumphant. The energy that had carried them at the start of this trial had drained away, leaving only silence and shame. I tightened my grip on the binder in front of me, my heart pounding. This was it, the end of the storm, one way or another. The judge entered, his black robe flowing as he settled into his chair. He shuffled the papers before him, adjusted his glasses, and cleared his throat. "This court has reviewed the testimonies, the documents, and the audio recordings submitted as evidence," he began, his voice steady, almost heavy with the weight of his words. "What I have seen today is not the picture of a mother unfit to raise her child. On the contrary." Mark shifted in his chair. His lawyer straightened, as if preparing for one last desperate attempt to turn the tide. The judge continued. "Mrs. Taylor has provided ample proof that she has been the primary caregiver of Daniel Taylor. School records, medical files, and financial documentation all confirm her consistent presence and support. Witness statements corroborate this." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. Meanwhile, the petitioner, Mr. Mark Taylor, has provided no substantial evidence of neglect. His accusations were not supported by fact, but rather by statements from family members whose credibility has been compromised by the revelation of a recording in which Mr. Taylor stated explicitly that his motive was not the child's welfare, but punishment toward his wife. The words echoed in the silent courtroom like hammer blows. Mark's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, with all due respect." "Sit down, Mr. Talbot," the judge snapped, his patience gone. Talbot sank back into his chair. Mark's fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. The judge leaned forward, folding his hands on the bench. Custody cases are never easy. They are emotional, painful, and deeply personal. But the guiding principle of this court is clear. The best interests of the child come first. And in this case, it is evident who has consistently acted in Daniel Taylor's best interests. My breath caught. My whole body tensed as I waited for the words that would decide my future. This court rules that full physical and legal custody of Daniel Taylor will be granted to his mother, Jessica Taylor. The father, Mr. Mark Taylor, will be permitted visitation under supervision until further review by Child Services. This ruling is effective immediately. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The words settled over me, like sunlight after a storm. I had won, but it wasn't just victory. It was vindication. The lies had been stripped away, and the truth had been seen. Behind me, I heard a muffled gasp. My mother's hand clutched at her pearls, her face pale. My father rubbed his temple, as if the weight of disappointment was too much to bear. Mark, though. He exploded. "This is insane," he shouted, slamming his fist against the table so hard the sound reverberated through the room. "She's manipulating you. She's lying. I'm the father. He's my son." The bailiff stepped forward, his hand hovering near his belt. "Sir, sit down." Mark's lawyer tugged at his sleeve, hissing, "Mark, stop!" But he didn't stop. He turned toward me, his eyes wild, and spat, "You think you've won? You think this is over? You'll regret this, Jess." The judge's gavel came down hard. Bang, bang! "Order! Mr. Taylor, one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Mark's words dissolved into incoherent mutters as he collapsed into his chair, red-faced and shaking. I sat frozen, my heart racing, but I kept my eyes forward. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. Not now. The judge softened his tone as he looked at me. "Mrs. Taylor, this has been a difficult ordeal. I commend your composure and the clarity of your evidence. This court hopes this decision provides stability for your son." Case adjourned. The gavel struck once more, and just like that, it was over. The courtroom erupted into noise, papers shuffling, people rising from their seats. My lawyer leaned close, whispering, "You did it. He can't touch you now. Daniel is safe." Safe. The word lodged in my chest, warm and heavy. As I gathered my things, I caught sight of Mark one last time. He was hunched forward, his face buried in his hands, his perfect image crumbling into dust. For years, I had lived under that shadow, afraid of what he could take from me. But now, he had nothing left to take. In the hallway outside, I pressed my back against the wall, my knees threatening to give way. For the first time in months, I let the tears come, not of fear, not of defeat, but of relief. I had fought. I had stood my ground, and the court had seen the truth. When I finally stepped out of the courthouse, the afternoon sun hit my face. It felt different, brighter, warmer, freer. Daniel wasn't with me that day. He was at school, blissfully unaware of the battle that had just been fought for him. But I knew when I picked him up later, when I held his small hand in mine, I could look him in the eyes and say, "You're safe now. Mommy's not going anywhere." And this time, I would know it was true. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a heavy thud, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The sun was bright, almost blinding, pouring down over the marble steps. People streamed past, murmuring, gathering their files, heading to their cars. But for me, the world slowed to a crawl. It was over. The battle that had consumed my every waking thought, every ounce of strength, every sleepless night, it was finally over. I gripped the railing, steadying myself, afraid my legs might give out. A weight I'd carried for so long had been lifted, and without it, I felt both lighter and strangely hollow. My lawyer walked beside me, a kind smile softening her features. "You did incredibly well, Jess. Not many people could have stayed that composed under so much pressure." I nodded, unable to find words. My throat was tight. "Thank you," I whispered, "for believing me." She squeezed my arm. The evidence spoke for itself, but you held your ground. That's what made the difference. Then she left me with a small wave, disappearing into the crowd, leaving me alone on the courthouse steps. A few moments later, I saw my parents. They lingered near the entrance, their faces pale, avoiding my gaze. My mother clutched her purse with white knuckles. My father stared at the ground as if it held all the answers he couldn't find in me. I took a slow step toward them. "You believed him," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You looked at me, your own daughter, and told the court I wasn't fit to raise my son." My mother's lips parted, but no words came. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again, shaking his head. Finally, my mother whispered, We thought Mark was telling the truth. He's always been so sure of himself. We didn't want to believe you were struggling." "I wasn't struggling," I snapped, the pain bubbling up. "I was fighting, alone. While you were nodding along to his lies, I was holding Daniel through the night when he couldn't breathe. I was working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. I didn't need judgment. I needed support." My father looked up then, his eyes glassy. "Jess, we're sorry." But it was too late. Their words couldn't undo what had been said in court. Their betrayal had cut deeper than Mark's lies, because Mark went expected. But my parents? That wound would take much longer to heal. "I can forgive," I said softly, my voice breaking, "but I won't forget." I walked past them, leaving them on the steps. For once, I didn't feel guilty. When I picked Daniel up from school that afternoon, he ran into my arms like nothing had happened. His backpack bounced against his shoulders, his smile wide and unburdened. "Mommy!" he shouted, throwing his little arms around my neck. "Did you come early today?" I kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of crayons and playground dust. "Yeah, baby. Mommy came early. And guess what?" "What?" His eyes lit up with curiosity. "I'm not going anywhere. Not ever." He tilted his head, not fully understanding the gravity of my words, but he grinned anyway. "Good. 'Cause I need you to help me build my Lego castle tonight." I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. "Deal." And just like that, the storm that had raged over us for months seemed to clear, not because everything was fixed, but because I finally knew we were safe. That night, after Daniel was asleep, I stood in his doorway watching him breathe, his chest rising and falling in the soft glow of his nightlight. He looked so peaceful, untouched by the chaos that had nearly torn his world apart. I whispered into the quiet room, "I did it, baby. I kept my promise." For the first time in years, I felt proud, not of surviving, but of standing tall. I had faced down lies, betrayal, and the crushing weight of my family's judgment, and I had come out the other side, scarred but stronger. Mark's words still echoed in my mind. I don't care about the kid. I just want Jess to lose everything. But he had lost, not me. He would live with supervised visits, his perfect image shattered. He could no longer use Daniel as a pawn in his game of control. And maybe, just maybe, one day he would realize what he had thrown away. As for me, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Single motherhood was hard, and the scars of this trial would linger. My relationship with my parents might never be the same. But none of that mattered compared to the one truth that now anchored me. Daniel was mine, safe, protected, loved, and love, quiet, steady, unshakable, was stronger than any lie Mark could ever tell. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't before. Truth doesn't shout. It doesn't need grand gestures or expensive lawyers. It waits, patient, steady, until the lies collapse under their own weight. And when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't just free you, it changes everything. For me, it rebuilt the world. Not the same as before. Maybe smaller, maybe lonelier, but truer. And in that truth, Daniel and I could start again, together. At the end of the day, this wasn't just a courtroom battle. It wasn't just about custody papers or legal arguments. It was about truth. It was about a mother who refused to be silenced. And it was about a man who thought lies and appearances could win him everything until his own words destroyed him. Jessica didn't just win custody. She reclaimed her voice. She proved that love, the kind of love that stays up all night with a sick child, that sacrifices, that shows up day after day, is stronger than any performance, stronger than any lie. Mark wanted control, but in the end, the truth stripped that control away, and what remained was what had always been there, a mother's quiet, unshakable strength. So remember this, lies may win in the short run, but the truth always waits. And when it finally comes to light, it has the power to burn away every false mask. Because in the end, what protects us, what saves us, isn't perfection. It's love. And love always tells the truth. So if you were in Jess's place, what would you choose? Power, honor, or family ties? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next gripping and mysterious stories we bring to you.